Turning to the hymns of the Rig-Veda, we find, as remarked by Muir, the phrase Yuga Yuga used at least a half a dozen places, and that interpreted by Sayana to mean a period of time. We have Uttara Yugani, a later age, and we read Uttare Yuge in a later age, while in the next two verses we have the phrases shown above clearly referring to the latter and earlier ages of the gods. The word Devanam is in the plural and Yuga is in the singular, and it is not therefore possible to take the phrase to mean generations of gods. Context again clearly shows that a reference to time is intended, for the hymn speaks of the creation and birth of the gods in early primeval times. Now, if we interpret this to mean an age of gods, why should these others not be interpreted to mean human ages, is more than could be understood. There are again expressed passages in the Rig-Veda where this cannot be taken to mean generations of men. Thus, in 5:52-4, which is a hymn to Maruts, we read the following. Here the verb protect in the nominative all those, and the object is the mortal man, while from injury in the ablative denotes the object against which the protection is shot. So far the sentence therefore means all those who protect man from injury. And now the question is, what does Manusha Yuga mean? If we take it to mean generations of men in the objective case, it becomes superfluous, for man is already the object of protect. It is therefore necessary to assign to Manusha Yuga the only other meaning we know of, that is, human ages, and take the phrase as an accusative of time. Thus, when interpreted, the whole sentence means all those who protect man from injury during the human ages. No other construction is more natural or reasonable than this, but still Professor Max Mueller translates the verse to mean all those who protect the generations of men who protect the mortal from injury. In spite of the fact that this is tautological, and there's no conjunctive particle in the text, like cha, to join what, according to him, are two objects of the verb protect. Mr. Griffith seems to have perceived this difficulty, and has translated it as, who all, through the ages of mankind, guard mortal man from injury. Another passage is equally decisive in this point. The verse is addressed by Agni, and people are said to have put him in front to secure his blessings. It is as follows. Here, righteous, strong, visible to all, Agni, attentive-eared, most wide-reaching, thee, and divine, are all in the accusative case governed by Dahire, and describe the qualities of Agni. Jahain, the people, is nominative, and Dahire is the only verb in the text. For the welfare denotes the purpose for which people placed Agni in front, and Gire, by praises, is the means by which the favor of Agni is to be secured. If we therefore leave out the various adjectives of Agni, the verse means the people have placed Agni, as described, in front of their welfare with praises. The only expression that remains is Manusha Yuga, and it can go with the other words in a natural way only as an accusative of time. The verse then would mean the people have placed Agni, as described, in front for their welfare with praises during human ages. But Griffith takes Yuga to mean generations, supplying a verb of his own, and translates the last part of the verb thusly. Men's generations magnify Agni with praise songs. This shows what straits we are reduced to if we once make up our mind not to interpret Manusha Yuga to mean a period of time, for the word magnify does not exist in the original. This verse also occurs in other sources, and Madhihara there explains Manusha Yuga to mean human ages or periods of time, such as fortnights, and we have therefore at least two passages where Manusha Yuga must, according to the recognized rules of interpretation, been taken to mean periods of time and not generations of men, unless we're prepared to give up the natural construction of the sentence. Unfortunately, there are no more passages in the Rig-Veda where Manusha Yuga occurs in juxtaposition with words like Jane or Martyam, so as to leave no option as regards to the meaning to be assigned to Yuga. But if the meaning of a phrase is once definitely determined, even from a single passage, we can safely understand the phrase in the same sense in other passages, provided the meaning does not conflict there with the content. That is how the meaning of many a Vedic word has been determined by scholars like Yashka. And we are not venturing on a new path in adopting the same process of reasoning in the present case. But if Manusha Yuga means human ages and not human generations, we have still to determine the exact duration of these ages. In the Rig-Veda, which says, "We allot thee 110,000 years, 2, 3, or 4 yugas," the word yuga obviously stands for a period of time not shorter than 10,000 years. There are grounds to hold that in the early days of the Rig-Veda, yuga must have denoted a shorter period of time, or at least that was one of its meanings in the early days. Rig-Veda often speaks of the first dawn, or the first of the coming dawns, while the last dawn is mentioned, and the dawn is said to have the knowledge of the first day. Now, independently of what has been said before about Vedic dawns, the ordinal number first, as applied to the dawn, is intelligible only if we suppose it to refer to the first dawn of the year, or the dawn on the first day of the year, somewhat like the phrase first night is used in the Brahmanas. The first and the last dawn must therefore be taken to signify the beginning and the end of the year in those days, and in the light of what has been said about the nature of Vedic dawns in previous videos, we may safely conclude that the first of the dawns was no other than the first of a set, or group of dawns that appeared at the close of the long night and commenced the year. Now this first dawn is described as wearing out human ages, while in other places we are told that the pious or goodly men extend the yugas in the appearance of the dawn. European scholars interpret yuga in the above passages to mean generations of men, but apart from the fact that the phrase Manusha Yuga must be understood to mean human ages in at least 2 passages discussed above, the context here is obviously in favor of interpreting the word yuga, occurring therein, as equivalent to a period of time. The dawn is here described as commencing a new course of heavenly ordinances, or holy sacrifices, and setting in motion the Manusha Yugani. With the first dawn came the sacrifices, as well as the cycle of time known as human ages, or that the human ages are reckoned from the first dawn. This association of Manusha Yuga, or human ages, with the first dawn at once enables us to definitely determine the length and duration of human ages, for if these ages commenced with the first dawn of the year, they must have ended with the last dawn of the year. In other words, Manusha Yuga collectively denoted the whole period of time between the first and last dawn of the year, while a single yuga denoted a shorter division of this period. Apart from the legend of Dirghatamas, we have, therefore, sufficient evidence in the Rig-Veda hold that the word yuga was used to denote a period of time shorter than 1 year, and that the phrase Manusha Yuga meant human ages, or the period of time between the first and last dawn of the year, not of human generations. The statement that Dirghatamas grew old in the 10th Yuga is now not only easy to understand, but enables us to determine, still more definitely, the meaning of Yuga in the days of the Rig-Veda. For if Yuga was part of Manusha Yuga, that is, the period between the first and last dawn of the year, and the legend of Dirghatamas a solar legend, the statement that Dirghatamas grew old in the 10th Yuga can only mean that the sun grew old in the 10th month. In other words, 10 yugas were supposed to intervene between the first and last dawn, or the 2 termini of the year, and as 10 days or 10 fortnights would be too short, and 10 seasons too long a period of time to lie between these limits, the word yuga in the phrase Dashama Yuga must be interpreted as to mean a month and nothing else. In short, Dirghatamas was the sun that grew old in the 10th month, and riding on the aerial waters was borne by them to their goal, that is, to the ocean, below the horizon. The waters here referred to are, in fact, the same over which the king Varuna is said to rule, or which flow by his commands, or for which he is said to have dug out a channel, and so cut out a path for Surya, and which, being released by Indra from the grass of Vitra, bring on the sun. Professor Max Muller, in his Contributions to the Science of Mythology, has shown that most of the achievements of the Ashvins can be rationally explained by taking them as referring to the decaying sun. The legend of Dirghatamas is thus only a mythical representation of the Arctic sun who ascends above the bright ocean, becomes visible for Manusha Yuga, or 10 months, and then drops again into the nether waters. What these waters are and how their nature has been long misunderstood will be further explained in a subsequent video, when we have come to the discussion of Vedic myths. Suffice it to say, for the present, that the legend of Dirghatamas, interpreted as above, is in full accord with the legend of the Dashagvas, who are described as holding their sacrificial session only for 10 months. We have discussed the meaning of Yuga and Manusha Yuga at some length because the phrases have been much misunderstood, in spite of clear passages showing that a period of time was intended to be denoted by them. These passages establish the fact that Manusha Yuga denoted human ages, and the association of these ages with the first dawn further shows the length of a yuga was regarded to be shorter than a year. Mention of a 10th yuga finally settles the meaning of yuga as 1 month, and that is how we have arrived with the meaning of these phrases, and I'm glad to find that they have been anticipated in conclusion by Professor Rangacharya of Madras on different grounds. In his essay on the yugas, he discusses the root meaning of yuga, and taking it to denote a conjunction, observes as follows: the phases of the moon being so readily observable, it is probable that, as suggested by Professor Weber, the idea of a period of time known as a yuga, and depending on the conjunction of certain heavenly bodies, was originally derived from a knowledge of these phases. But Professor Weber further strengthens his supposition by referring to a passage cited in the Shammisva Brahmana, wherein the 4 yugas are still designated by their more ancient names and are connected with the 4 lunar phases to which they evidently owe their origin. Mr. Rangacharya then refers to Darsha, the ancient name for the conjunction of the sun and the moon, and concludes, there is also old mythological or other evidence which leads us to conclude that our forefathers observed many other kinds of interesting celestial conjunctions, and in all probability the earliest conception of a yuga meant the period from new moon to new moon, that is, 1 lunar month. The passage stating that it was the first dawn that set the cycle of Manusha Yuga into motion is already quoted above, and if we compare this statement with Rig-Veda 10:138-6, where Indra, after killing Vitra and producing the dawn and the sun, is said to have set the ordering of the months in the sky, it will be further evident the cycle of time, which began with the first dawn, was a cycle of months. We may therefore safely conclude that Manusha Yuga represented in early days a cycle of months, during which the sun was above the horizon, rather than a period of sunshine and action when the ancestors of the Aryan race held their sacrificial sessions or performed their religious and social ceremonies. But there are many other passages in the Rig-Veda which support the same view. Manusha Yuga being everywhere interpreted by Western scholars to mean human generations or tribes, the real meaning of these passages has become obscure and unintelligible. Thus we have, all sacrificers with ladles lifted invoke that mighty Indra for Manusha Yuga. And in the meaning, evidently, is that Soma libations are offered to Indra during the period of the human ages. But taking Manusha Yuga to denote human tribes, Griffith translates it as, all tribes of mankind invoke Indra, and etc. a rendering which, though intelligible, does not convey the spirit of the original. Similarly, Agni is said to shine during the human ages. There too the meaning human tribes is unnecessarily foisted upon the phrase. The most striking illustration of the impropriety in interpreting Yuga to mean a generation is, however, furnished by Rig-Veda 2.2.2. Here, Agni is said to shine for Manusha Yuga and Kashapa. Now, Kashapa means nights, and the most natural interpretation would be to take Manusha Yuga and Kashapa as allied expressions, denoting a period of time. The verse therefore would mean, O Agni, thou shinest during human ages and nights. It is necessary to mention nights, because though Manusha Yuga is a period of sunshine, including a long day and a succession of ordinary days and nights, yet the long or continuous night which followed the Manusha Yuga could not have been included in the latter phrase. Therefore, when the whole period of the solar year is intended, the compound expression like Manusha Yuga and the continuous nights was necessary, and that is the meaning of the phrase. But Professor Oldenburg, following Max Muller, translates it as follows: O Agni, thou shinest on human tribes on continuous nights. Here, in the first place, it's difficult to understand what shining on human tribes means, and secondly, if Kashapa means continuous nights, it could mean nothing except the long continuous night, and if so, why not take Manusha Yuga to represent a period of the solar year which remains after the long night is excluded from it? As observed before, Professor Max Muller has correctly translated Kashapa by continuous nights, but that he has missed the true meaning of the expression of Manusha Yuga in this place. A similar mistake has also been committed with respect to the following verse. Here, in spite of the accent, Max Muller takes Kashapa as an accusative, and so does Sayana. But Sayana correctly interprets the expression as, may we rejoice for many autumns and nights. Seasons and nights is a compound phrase, and the particle sha becomes unmeaning if we split it up and takes nights with one verb and seasons with another. Of course, so long as the Arctic theory was unknown, the phrase seasons and nights or Manusha Yuga and nights is unintelligible, inasmuch as nights were included in seasons or in yugas. But Professor Max Muller has himself suggested the solution of the difficulty by interpreting Kashapa as continuous nights, and adopting this rendering, we can also, with greater propriety, take seasons and nights together, as indicated by the particle cha, and understand the expression to mean a complete solar year, including the long night. The addition of Kashapa to Manusha Yuga, therefore, further supports the conclusion that the phrase indicates a period of sunshine, as we have seen previously. There are many other passages in translating which unnecessary confusion or obscurity has been caused by taking Manusha Yuga to mean human tribes, but a discussion of these is not relevant to our subject at hand. Independent corroboration of the conclusion drawn from the legends of the Dashbhagas and Dirghatamas is furnished by the number of seasons mentioned in certain Vedic texts. A period of sunshine of 10 months followed by a long night of 2 months can well be described as 5 seasons of 2 months each, followed by the sinking of the sun into the waters below the horizon. And as a matter of fact, we find the years so described, a verse which occurs also in the Rig-Veda, with a slight variation, and also in the Prashanapad. It may be literally translated as follows: The 5-footed father of 12 forms, they say, is full of watery vapors in the further half of heaven. These others again say that he, the far-seeing, is placed on the 6-spoked and 7-wheeled car in the nearer half of the heaven. The adjective far-seeing is made up to qualify the 7-wheeled instead of he in Rig-Veda being the locative's case. While Shankaracharya, in his commentary on the Prashanapad, splits upare into 2 words, u and pare, taking u as an expletive. These readings do not materially alter the meaning of the verse. The context everywhere clearly indicates that the year god of 12 months is here described. The previous verse in the hymn mentions the 12-spoked wheel in which 720 sons of Agni are established, a clear reference here to a year of 12 months. There is, therefore, no doubt the passage contains the description of the year in the two halves of the verse, which were introduced by the phrases "they say" and "others say," give us two opinions of the nature of the year god of 12 forms. Let us now see what these opinions are. Some say the year god is 5-footed, and that it is divided into 5 seasons, and others say that it is a 6-spoked car, or 6 seasons. It is clear from this the number of seasons is held by some to be 5, and 6 by others in early days. Why should there be a difference of opinion? The Atrareya Brahmana 1.1 and the Tatriya Samhita 1.623 explains that the 2 seasons of Hemanta and Shishir together made a joint season, thereby reducing the number of seasons from 6 to 5. This explanation seems to be an afterthought, for in Shatapa Brahmana, Varsha and Sharad are compounded for this purpose instead of Hemanta and Shishir. It shows that in the days of Tatriya Samhita and the Brahmanas, it was not definitely known or settled which 2 seasons of the 6 should be compounded to reduce the number to 5, but as 5 seasons were sometimes mentioned in the Vedas, some explanation was felt to be necessary to account for the smaller number, and such explanation was devised by taking together any 2 consecutive seasons out of 6 and regarding them as one joint season of 4 months. This explanation is too vague to be true. We cannot believe the system of compounding any 2 seasons, according to one's choice, was ever followed in practice. We must therefore give up the explanation as unsatisfactory and see if the verse from the Rig-Veda quoted above enables us to find out a better explanation of the fact that the seasons were once held to be 5. Now, the first half of this verse describes the 5-footed Father as full of watery vapors in the further part of heaven, while the year of 6-spoked car is said to be far-seeing. In short, Purushinam, full of, or dwelling in water, in the first line, appears to be a counterpart of far-seeing in the second line. This is made clear by the verses which follow. Thus, the 13th verse of the hymn speaks of the 5-spoked wheel as remaining entire and unbroken, though ancient, and the next, or the 14th verse, says that the unwasting wheel revolves. The 10 draw it yoked over the expanse. The sun's eye goes covered with rajas. All worlds are dependent on him. Comparing this with the 11th verse first quoted, it may easily be seen that Purushinam, full of watery vapors, and Rajasha Avitram, covered with rajas, are almost synonymous phrases, and the only inference we can draw from them is that the 5-footed year god, or the sun, went to dwell in watery vapors, or became invisible or covered with darkness, and rajas, for some time in the farther part of heaven. The expression that the 10, yoked, draw his carriage, further shows the 5 seasons are not made by combining any 2 consecutive seasons out of 6, as explained in the Brahmanas, or in that case the number of horses would not be called 10, but that the real year of 5 seasons or 10 months was here intended. When the number of seasons was increased to become 6, the year god ceased to be Purshin, full of waters, and became Vikshashanam, or far-seeing. We have seen the sun, as represented by Dirghatamas, grew old in the 10th month, and riding on aerial waters went into the ocean. The same idea is expressed by the present verse, which describes 2 different views about the nature of the year, one of 5, the other of 6 seasons, and contrasts their leading features with each other. Thus, Pare Adra is contrasted with Upara Adra in the second line, Panchapadam compared with Panchare in the next verse, Shadare and Purshanam with Vai Shakshanam. In short, The verse under consideration describes the year either 1 as 5-footed and lying in waters in the farthest part of heaven, or 2 as mounted on a 6-spoked cart and far-seeing in the nearer part of heaven. These two descriptions cannot evidently apply to seasons in one and the same place, and the artifice of combining 2 consecutive seasons cannot be accepted as a solution to the question. 5 seasons in 10 months, followed by watery residence of the sun or dark nights, is what is precisely described in the first half of the passage, and from what has been said hitherto, it can easily be seen that it is the Arctic year of 10 months herein described. The verse, especially the contrast between Purishinam and Vishakshanam, does not appear to have attracted the attention it deserves. But in the light of the Arctic theory, the description is now as intelligible as any. The Vedic bards have here preserved for us the memory of a year of 5 seasons or 10 months, although their year had long been changed to one of 12 months. The explanation given in the Brahmanas are all so many post facto devices to account for the mention of 5 seasons in the Rig-Veda, and I do not think we are bound to accept them when the fact of 5 seasons can be better accounted for. I have remarked before that in searching for evidence of ancient traditions, we must expect to find latter traditions associated with them, and, as discussed above, we find a good illustration of this remark. The first line of the verse, though it speaks of 5 seasons, describes the year as 12 formed, while the second line, which deals with a year of 6 seasons or 12 months, speaks of it as 7 wheeled, and that is made up of 7 months or 7 suns, or 7 rays of the sun. This may appear rather inconsistent at first sight, but the history of words in any language will show the old expressions are preserved in the language long after they have ceased to denote the ideas primarily expressed by them. Thus we now use coins for exchange, but the word fiduciary is derived from pecus, or cattle, is still retained in the language, and similarly we speak of the rising of the sun, though we know now that it is not the luminary that rises, but the earth, by rotating round his axis, makes the sun visible to us. Very much in the same way, or by the same process, expressions like 7-horsed or 7-wheeled, as applied to the year or the sun, must have become recognized and established as current phrases in the language before the hymns assumed their current form, and the Vedic bards could not have discarded them, even when they knew they were not applicable to the state of things before them. On the contrary, we find in the Brahmanas every artifice that ingenuity could suggest was tried to make these old phrases harmonize with the state of things then en vogue, and from the religious to the sacrificial point of view, it was quite necessary to do so. But when we have to examine the question from an historical standpoint, it is our duty to separate the relics from the older period from the facts or incidents of the latter period, in which the former are sometimes inevitably mixed up, and if we analyze the verse in question in this way, we shall clearly see in it traces of a year of 10 months and 5 seasons. The same principle which is applicable in other cases, as for instance when we find the Nagvas mentioned together with the 7 Vipras. The bards who gave us the present version of the hymns knew of the older primeval state of things only by tradition, and it is no wonder if these traditions are occasionally mixed up with latter events. On the contrary, the preservation of so many traditions of the primeval home is itself a wonder, and it is this fact which invests the oldest Vedas with such peculiar importance from religious as well as historical point of view. To sum up, there are clear traditions preserved in the Rig-Veda which show the year once consisted of 7 months or 7 suns, as in the legends of Adita's sons, or that there are 10 months of the year, as in the legends of the Dashagvas or Dirghatamas, and these cannot be accounted for except on the Arctic theory. These 10 months form the sacrificial session of the primeval sacrificers of the ancient race, and this period was denominated by Manusha Yuga, or human ages, an expression much misunderstood by Western scholars. The sun went below the horizon in the 10th of these yugas, and Indra fought with Vala in the period of darkness which followed at the end of the year. Again brought back the sun, dwelling in darkness during the period. The whole year of 12 months was thus made up of Manusha Yuga and the continuous night, and in spite of the fact that the Vedic bards lived later in places where the sun was above the horizon for 12 months, the expression Manusha Yuga and Kashapa is still found in the Rig-Veda. It is true that the evidence discussed is mostly legendary, but that does not lessen its importance in any way, for it will be seen later on that some of these traditions are Indo-European in character. The tradition that the year was regarded by some to have been made up only of 5 seasons, or that only 10 horses were yoked to the chariot of the sun, is again in full accord with the meaning of these legends, and it will be shown further that in the Vedic literature there are express statements about a sacrificial session of 10 months, which are quite independent of these traditions, and which therefore independently prove and strengthen the conclusions deduced from the legends discussed. If you find this fascinating, please hit the like button. If you're not already, go ahead and subscribe. Click the bell so you'll be notified whenever we put out more great videos like this one.